Rough road trip for the Fish, and the Dodgers headed into town, followed by the Bravos. Some tough series on deck here for the Marlins, but can they play spoiler? Tons to get into. This is Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins, your daily Marlins pod. I am your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up, of course, at Miami Marlins_UK. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. This is your team every day, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. There's also a YouTube channel, guys, so hit subscribe over on the YouTube channel. It's also called Locked On Marlins. Join me in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. Are the Marlins going to sweep the Dodgers and Braves this week? It's probably ambitious, but it's baseball, baby. For those watching, you will see I have a guest, a first-time guest. I'm delighted to welcome on. Yes, in the last couple of weeks with me hosting, there's going to be some old friends returning, but I'm delighted to welcome on some new friends, some Twitter friends, some ex-friends. You know the drill. Alan Settles in the house. Alan, how are we doing?
Doing well. Super excited to be here. Long-time listener and excited to be a part of the ride today.
Oh, for sure. I'm delighted to have you on. This is excellent for me. I love the fact that there's some, people that maybe we haven't spoken before, onto the show. Should be fun. Alan, for the listeners that maybe kind of like trying to piece this together and go, Settle, recognize that name. Where are they? Where have they seen this name before? What are you doing baseball related at this point? Who are you writing for, et cetera, et cetera? Where are people going to see your work at this point?
Yeah, so for the last year, I have had the benefit of covering the Marlins as a part of Fansided's network. So Marlins Maniac, you can read my stuff there. I'm available there.
Oh, baby. Marlins Maniac, one of my favorite sources, no doubt. It's fair to say the Marlins Maniac content, it's as it sounds. It can be, wow, what's the right word for this one? It can be controversial. I think that's the word I'm looking for at times. So it's exactly as the handle suggests, which is excellent. Well, Alan, I appreciate you coming on for the first time for sure. And this is going to be a fun conversation. Unfortunately, we've got a road trip that didn't quite go to plan. So we'll kind of dig into that. We've got two very tough series at home on deck here with some big storylines, particularly with Shohei Ohtani as well. And of course, the return in El Capitan. So there's tons for us to get into. It's an off day for the Marlins. So normally on a Monday, if they are playing at this kind of time, you normally expect like an email to come out from Marlins Communications to say, we've made 75 roster moves. We'll probably get that tomorrow. So we haven't got that to work with today. Before we get into everything, though, this episode is sponsored by FanDuel. And now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Alan, rough series against the Nats. 4-game series. It felt like that series went on for a week, to be honest with you. Every time I looked up, they were playing the Nats. But 4-game series didn't go the Marlins' way in the end. They all kind of followed the same pattern after game one. But what were your kind of main takeaways from that series against Washington?
Yeah, I think I had a couple of things that stood out to me most. First is the fight in the Marlins. And so it felt like really early on in the season, these tended to be more toward a blowout. The score would get out of control really quick. But it is encouraging, especially with this young group, to see some fight, some scrappiness, not getting blown out at any point in the series that I can recall, keeping it close when you think of what to build on for the next few years. If that's a trait of the team, then that's an exciting thing, I think.
Agreed. That's a really good call out, by the way, because early on, that the first month, it felt like just things were getting out of hand so quickly in them games. I mean, I know they were playing kind of short-handed, obviously, with like the rotation was just basically they took the whole rotation that was on Fangraphs, they put all of that rotation onto the IL, and then they just tried their best. Puck was, can you remember when AJ Puck was starting games for the? Where were you when AJ Puck was starting games for the Marlins? Wild scenes. But those games, the AJ Puck one actually got out. That was one of the first ones that got truly out of hand, where the first inning was fine, and then the second inning, I don't know what happened, but he basically started pitching like he was blindfolded and drunk. I don't know what happened, but those games they did. The hallmark of the early Marlins season was blowout games. decimated, like the pitcher was decimated. Now, although the names maybe weren't familiar to us as fans headed into the year, it's a scrappy team led by Skip Schumacher. So it's not surprising that it's a scrappy team, right? But great call out. Who's on the pitching side? Who's kind of stood out to you? Who's become like your new kind of, I don't know, guilty pleasure, if that's the right way of phrasing it from a rotation perspective?
I'll tell you one off the beaten path. And he's not played recently. He's been injured for a long time, but I am fascinated with Ryan Weathers when he comes back, what he can be, what he can look like. He's the guy that I can't get over in my head, kind of this X factor. Currently, Edward Cabrera, I think him solving some of his walk issues and getting back on track. This is the first time I feel confident in an Edward Cabrera start that things aren't going off the rail. But those are a couple of guys that I'm really excited about, especially looking at next season and what it could mean.
Yeah, definitely. Ryan Weathers in particular, I mean, we've seen this story before, right? It felt like we've seen it with Jesus Luzardo, where, you know, a West Coast guy underperforming a little bit, big prospect status.
Yeah.
Get him into Miami. Next thing is, you know, they're polished up and they look impressive. And straight away for Ryan Weathers, for me in spring, I was like, okay, this dude looks different. He carried that on through the season. I think for me, just so disappointed, this kind of random injury just effectively like ended his season, when at one point I thought Ryan Weathers was going to be the all-star for the Marlins, to be honest with you. I know probably Tanner Scott rightly would have deserved that, to be honest with you. Look, you know, where we got to, but the way Weathers started and the way Tanner Scott started, I was looking at this thinking, Weathers could be the all-star for the Marlins. That's how impressive he was. But yeah, like I mentioned, that injury, just a random one, and then he's out effectively half a season, which is, you know, he's obviously near comeback now, which is encouraging. But yeah, so disappointing that we didn't get to have the full body of work. I think Ryan Weathers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen his name a couple of times on the injury report starting to ramp back up. And so really excited for what he can bring. If we get a glimpse of that at the end of the season, that'll be great, but especially heading into next year.
No doubt. Do you believe in Eddie Cabrera and the current version of Eddie Cabrera?
I don't know. That seems like a dangerous question. Every time you get excited about him and his profile, there's a 9-walk game or a ERA that inflates up. But it's been a few in a row now that he's looked really sharp. And so if any organization could tinker and figure out what the issue is with a young pitcher, you figure it's Miami and their staff. And so encouraged, cautiously encouraged, I think would be the way I'd word it.
Great description. I mean, it's been a roller coaster following Edward Cabrera for the last 5 seasons or whatever it might be. He's been around for years, but barely accrued any amounts of service time because he keeps like getting hurt and whatever. But man, oh man, if he can carry this forward into next season, this version of Eddie Cabrera, the last like 2 months, give or take, then, you know, he's got a chance. So yeah, encouraging. What about on the bullpen side? Because I mean, talk about roster churn. Man, oh man, the bullpen is fully churned, because I know Declan Cronin was on the opening day roster, but I think that might be it. And maybe Bender, actually. I think Tony Bender was on the roster too.
Yeah,
so
right.
Yeah, apart from that, it's been a full churn. Either they're hurt or they're traded or they've been DFA'd or whatever it might be. So who's kind of standing out to you in this new group of relievers?
I'm excited to see what Declan Cronin can do, especially he's got some more high leverage work. Calvin Fauché, watching him pitch, again, injury bug cropping up, really killed some of that momentum. But I was super excited, especially in the wake of the Tanner Scott trade, to see what he could bring to the table. In my mind, I'm always doing the math right now of who can stick in some of these roles for the long term. And he really looked special with some of his velocity and some of his things that he was bringing to the table. And so in the wake of him getting injured, Declan Cronin seems like he could be a piece long term. I've enjoyed watching him pitch, especially a little bit more recently.
Yeah, me too. Cronin stood out to me like opening weekends and has been an effective piece ever since. Obviously gave up, the streak's over, by the way, for Declan Cronin. He gave up his first home run of the season. Granted, we're in mid-September and he's been on the roster most of the year.
Incredible.
So finally gives up a home run. James Woods, I think, went and got one, right? I mean, James Woods stood out in that game. Boy, oh boy, multi-home run game for James Woods. I haven't seen him really before. It's kind of the first look I've had. And man, a super impressive prospect I think the Nats have got there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been so exciting over the trade deadline, bringing in some of these young guys and kind of figuring out who's got staying power and who doesn't. And so it's exciting to see the quality or quantity over quality that the Marlins have put together. But playing a guy like James Wood and seeing his skill set, seeing his size, seeing his power, his ability to steal bases, even some of his abilities in the outfield, he looks like a classic 5-tool kind of player. And so I got almost a little bit jealous of him, building around some of this young nucleus. It'd be awesome to have a guy like that in the middle of it all. Washington's got something special that they're building around him for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the right word is stud normally, right? He looks a stud, and I mean, yeah, Sunday was impressive. Also, old friend though, Nasim Nunez was playing shortstop a ton for the Nats in this series. Again, first time I've really seen Nasim Nunez like up close and personal and watched him at shortstop. And again, it's interesting because you get this. We've been watching Xavier Edwards every day at shortstop, and then you see Nasim Nunez playing shortstop. I've got to be honest. They look completely different. They like Xavier Edwards and Nasim Nunez. They look like multiple levels apart in terms of playing shortstop. And for me, I'm kind of glad about that. I'll ask you about Naz, equally about Xavier, but just my assessment on this one. I'm glad that we're seeing this now, where we know what Xavier Edwards is, but I also think we're getting to the point of knowing what Xavier Edwards isn't at shortstop. But I think that's kind of useful for us to know headed into the offseason because, for a pitching and defense team, shortstop's, it's got to be good. It has to be good. And I think I've made that mental note now that the Marlins need to think about something different at shortstop instead of Xavier Edwards. Xavier Edwards could be a fallback option, in a pinch type situation. He can play it okay. But I think for the Marlins to get where they want to get to, I think they're going to need to reconsider defensively what that looks like. And I'm not convinced the person's in the organization either, but let's just go back. Like to get your thoughts on this one. What did you make of Nasim Nunez this weekend? I mean, he looked lively. There was one or two error throws in there where he looked a little bit hyped, let's say. He's still a young guy, obviously, but what do you make of Naz?
He looked really impressive. He almost looked different than he did the last time that we saw him here with the club. Defensively, it seemed like there was a little bit of a gap between he and Cabrera for sure. Cabrera, I have trouble putting together his package in my mind because he's got the speed and he has the athleticism, but defensively, showing himself to be a liability more as time goes on. I don't know where Miami goes from there, though, thinking through what the future of that position looks like. I agree. That seems to be the most tumultuous in terms of what the future looks like for a position player.
Yeah, agreed. Tumultuous, I think, is a stunning word, by the way. So I'm glad you've used that one for sure. It is definitely, it's the biggest question mark, in my opinion, for the organization right now. I know there's people saying, hey, what about catcher and whatever, but catcher's going to resolve itself. Nick Fortes is already there. Yeah. He's already proven what he can do, rightly or wrongly. Augustin Ramirez is going to get an opportunity. But for me, I look at shortstop and I look up and down all the prospect rankings. I look at the current roster. I can't see anyone that's not 18 that can be, a big league player at this point. So I think that's an area that the Marlins prioritize this offseason. And unfortunately, I think it will maybe be a similar approach to where they were going last offseason with Jesus Luzardo and trying to get, a big time, young, controllable shortstop. It wouldn't stun me if the Marlins went down that pathway as well and maybe look to trade for one at this point, because it's a glaring hole at this point, I think, right?
Yeah, it's a tough fill too. I was looking through the list of free agents going into next season, and there's not really an obvious solution there. Miguel Rojas is a club option, and I'm not sure that a reunion there is worth much at all. But apart from Willy Adames, unless they were to spend massive money on a top guy, it's really a lot of Tim Andersons and Ahmed Rosarios and guys like that. So hopefully Bendix can pull a rabbit out of a hat in the trade market, but I'm really not sure what the solution for that looks like, honestly.
No, I'm not either. Let's see what the future holds for Miguel Rojas with the Dodgers. I mean, he's played a ton. He's actually had one of his best offensive seasons, I think, ever this year, actually, Miguel Rojas. But let's kind of play it forward. He's actually a free agent. The Dodgers move on. Would you welcome Miguel Rojas back to the Marlins on a 1-year, $5 million deal?
As a veteran presence. I think he could bring something to the table. He had some clubhouse issues with some of the younger guys, and so I would be curious. I would love to interview him and get his thoughts on how he might mesh with this more current young core, because the last thing that you would want is someone to go against the grain with what the Marlins are trying to build right now. I think it depends on, too, who the manager is. I would trust Skip to manage some of those things really well and some of those potential tensions, but it depends on who they went in what direction in terms of who's leading the franchise on field next year as well.
Yeah, so
he'd be an upgrade defensively, though, as sad as that is to say.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. It's unquestioned that Miguel Rojas is an upgrade defensively over pretty much any of the league, and we've always known that. But listen, Jazz isn't here now anymore. Yeah. Clearly there was issues there. Skip, I don't think is going to be here either. Not to say there was issues with Miguel Rojas specifically with Skip, but yeah, I mean, I don't think it's likely to be an outcome, but I think it's an interesting talk track. Let's hit the first ad, and then I wanted to talk about some of the offensive guys through this series. It was a tough series, a tough road trip in general, and so I wanted to get your sense about Connor Norby in particular. Xavier Edwards, Kyle Stowers, like the new young nucleus, all of which struggled a little bit in this road trip. But with two big series on deck, is it maybe, could the juice be turned up a bit and get these boys going? So we're going to get into them. Before we do that, though, let's firstly let you know about our good friends over at FanDuel. Yes, sir. And the producer's got the graphics up. And you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel here on Locked On Marlins. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime you want. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to Locked On Marlins and me, Peter Pratt, and Alan Settle in the house. The Marlins Maniac account, which I absolutely love. We are talking offense. We're going to flip it over to the offensive side anyway. Connor Norby, give me a sense of him, because, listen, he burst onto the scene. Everyone going absolutely crazy. And as always, you burst on the scene, the league adjusts. It's then over to you to adjust. And I think that's exactly the phase we're in with Connor Norby, where the league's kind of, okay, we've seen a few at-bats. We know where he likes it, but we also now know where he doesn't like it. And it's time to throw it there instead. So what generally have you made of Connor Norby and his kind of introduction to the Marlins?
Yeah, Connor Norby has been one of the more fascinating case studies in baseball, I think, this season, because you look at his prospect profile and what he was supposed to be good at coming in. He had okay power and he had okay speed, but for him to come right out of the gate and be blasting home runs every few days was a shocker. I didn't know he had the potential to do something like that. Looking at some of his advanced metrics, some of his hard hit numbers, exit velocity, average exit velocity, they've all been pretty low throughout the season. So I'm not really sure where the power binge came from. I do wonder if Marlins fans projecting forward are thinking that he's going to be Dan Uggla 2.0 or something like that, a masher home run hitter. Probably not in the profile so much, but he's a fascinating case study.
The interesting part with him, and this is where I think things get really interesting, going back to the previous topic around shortstop, is I think Connor Norby wants to play second base. I also think Xavier Edwards wants to play second base. I also think Otto Lopez wants to play second base. I think Jared Cerner wants to play second base. I mean, I think the Marlins have got 9 second basemen at this point. I think this is the most intriguing. And I know Connor Norby has kind of like, done it for the team and gone to third, and it's fine. But I don't think it's bad as the profile of a third baseman. And so I think this is a very intriguing situation in terms of like roster management and how they get the guys on into the spots, because, you have to, it's not all about the defensive positioning, but you got to look at this and think there's so many second basemen here. How's Bendix going to solve this riddle? Because, Norby, they want the stick in the lineup. Xavier, they want the stick in the lineup. Berger, they want to stick in the lineup.
Yeah.
I don't know where they go, but I sense that Norby wants to play second, and I sense Xavier does too. So I think it's going to be a very interesting kind of subplot here for the Marlins headed into 25.
No, that's a good word. Between first base and second base, it feels like they've got a dozen of each player at each position, and unfortunately, no shortstop in the mix. And so I'm not sure how Skip sorts that out for the rest of the season looking forward. I would almost wonder if Otto Lopez, with some of his defensive ability, might be a better fit at shortstop to slide over with Connor Norby at third and Xavier Edwards at second base, but it seems like they've got some places to pivot, even if they don't add anyone. But I agree. It's fascinating to watch how this shakes out for the rest of this year and beyond.
No doubt. And this is a very young group. There's a lot of green shoots coming through now. The Marlins have moved a ton of fan favorites, let's say. My favorite in Jazz gone, but there's other guys that have gone. Luis Arias, a big fan favorite too. Moved on a lot. There's a young core now. As a fan, who are you drawn to at this point? Like because we all have certain tendencies and biases to certain players. Like who's kind of drawing you in at this point on the offensive side?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Xavier Edwards, I was a big Luis Arias fan. I was really sad to see him go. His ability to make contact, to get out of bed in the morning and hit for 350 was incredible. But to immediately turn over and to find a guy with not quite as high contact skills, but something in that realm that can steal 30 bases in a season is really interesting to me. And so he's been fascinating. Norby seems like he's got some staying power. If I were to invest in a Marlins jersey with a name on the back, I think he would be pretty close up near the top of that. And then De Los Santos in the minor leagues, playing for the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp. I am fascinated to see what that kid looks like when he hits the major leagues.
Yeah, me too. Considering he's hit 30, they're leaving him down there to get 40 and then they're going to promote him. Is that what we're waiting on here? Just get 40. As soon as you hit 40, Davison, then you're up. Maybe that's the incentive here for him. I don't know, but I know it's tough because obviously Berger's been playing a ton of first. They've liked Jonah Bride at first as well, who's doing well. You've got to call out that Bride's doing everything he's been asked to do. It's just a little bit, I don't know if it's frustrating, if that's the right word, but not getting any look at all at De Los Santos in a 39 home run AAA campaign feels a touch weird for a team that's like more than 40 under 500 at this point, right?
That's been super surprising. It almost feels like there should be more season left and still some time to bring him up. But then you start to look at the calendar and we're down to the last couple of weeks now. And it is surprising. I expected at the beginning of September, we would hear talk of him getting called up and give him a taste of what Major League action, Major League pitching looks like. Super excited to see what he looks like. It is surprising we haven't gotten it yet. But if he can hit anywhere like he is in the minors right now, he'll be a fan favorite for sure.
Oh, no doubt. And I think it's time that the Marlins had like a big bopper at first base that just hit bombs. I think we need that. And listen, Lone Depot isn't conducive to, a big bopper typically. Like it needs to be a bigger bopper, a Stanton type dude and whatever. And a Soler really, like those are the guys. So maybe this, De Los Santos is that profile, like a Soler, like a Stanton that, doesn't matter where the fences are, I'm still clearing them type of thing. So I think, I think a lot of fans could be drawn into him. What have you seen from his, I know like the headline number is 39 home runs, but in terms of the actual profile, how are you feeling that's going to translate to the big league level for him?
I was looking up some of his minor league stats and comparing it with Pete Alonso, the New York Mets first baseman, a few weeks ago. And it is shocking how similar those two profiles are. So everything from counting stats to advanced metrics, what they're able to measure in the minor leagues, they are almost neck and neck in the way that they came up together. You never know how a guy will adapt to major league setting when he gets there. But in my mind, I think that that's a fair high-end ceiling kind of comp, which is perfect for a park like Lone Depot, because if he has power anywhere near that realm, it really won't matter what park factors look like or anything in that realm. That kind of power carries anywhere.
No doubt. Listen, if the Marlins have acquired Pete Alonso for AJ Puck, then that is a fat win for the Marlins, no doubt. So I'm very intrigued. Again, just the point there is I'm just surprised in some ways. I'm not surprised, but I am surprised that we haven't had like a small look just now, just tease it out. It's almost like a little teaser for the 25 season. Like season ticket sales are happening now like this. They're throwing out packages. Hey, membership flex and all this kind of like, but at this point, like throw a few more extra teasers out there, like guys, let's see, what's cooking here. So interesting. Let's hit the final ad. I want to come back. There's a few other guys I want to dig into on. I did like the topic you called out as well about if you were going to get a jersey with a player on the back, you'd go with Norby at this point. Interested to hear what other candidates there could be. And as well, the other news last week as well, the City Connect, RIP, the City Connect. The Marlins going to have a new look City Connect. So I'm going to talk about that as well shortly. Before we do that, let's let you know about our good friends over at PrizePicks. And PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's you against the numbers. No sharks. Don't have to worry about them. Just the numbers. That's it. All you do, pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in, baby, including 100 times your money. Yes, sir, you heard that correct. Win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And it's the best way to get in on the action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. So simply download PrizePicks today. Use the code, and the code is LOCKEDONMLB, and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's Locked On MLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Final segment on Locked On Marlins with me, Peter Pratt, and Alan Settle. Talk to me about catcher, because one of the other big name guys, Augustin Ramirez, haven't seen him either. He's on the 40-man, so that, again, is slightly confusing at this point. Nevertheless, we haven't seen him. There's some question marks around his catching. I'd like to see him to try and answer them questions. But talk to me about the offensive profile with Ramirez, because the Marlins have struggled offensively at the catcher position since JT Realmuto. And what do we think Augustin Ramirez can bring to this offense in 25 or beyond here?
He'll be fascinating to watch. Augustin Ramirez has a special level of intrigue just because of the player that he was traded for. So the franchise superstar going out somewhere else and him being the highlight coming in. I wonder, his power seems to be translatable. I wonder if he could be something like a Shea Langoliers, Francisco Alvarez type power source, 20-plus home runs wherever he lines up. Him fitting in at catcher specifically will be really critical. So as he tries to find staying power in the lineup, if he's got to switch to the first base DH equation, the at-bats will be a lot more limited, and I wonder how that'll affect his development. And so him coming along, getting some good reps in, and developing as a starting catcher feels like as critical a thing as this offseason has got in store.
It's huge. I don't think it can be underestimated how huge it is for this organization, for Augustin Ramirez to be a good major league level catcher, not just serviceable. I'm just not looking for like any dude behind there with, a mask on and a big glove. Like, we need him to be good. It's so critical to this organization that's what they can, create, I guess, out of the skills and the tools that are there already. So because to go and move Jazz, 2.5 years of control for Jazz, you have to get that. Yeah. You have to. You just, it's critical. And that's the way it's been sold to the fans, is this guy is going to be a stud. He's a big riser on obviously prospect lists and all that kind of stuff, but he can catch, but he can hit too. For me, it's huge. What do you think about Nick Fortes next year? Do you see Nick Fortes still being on the roster and still, getting, let's say, 50% of the starts here behind the dish for the Marlins?
Yeah, as much of a roller coaster, a merry-go-round of catchers as they've had recently, I do think that a veteran with some leadership, and especially a background with Miami, knowing how the franchise works, I think he would certainly have some value. I hope it's not as the starter. Hopefully Ramirez or someone else can take over that role and provide a little bit more consistency, a little bit more offense. But his ability to control base runners, especially over the second half, has really been impressive. So he's certainly got value. I would love to see him back in some capacity for sure.
He's really improved that aspect of his game. I remember last season, last offseason, spoke about it a ton on this show, that, just Nick Fortes, just like obviously the rule changes with base running, etc. He just really struggled to control the running game. Like everyone was running wild on Fortes. And obviously, Bethencourt came in. That was one of his specialisms. That's all he could do. He could do nothing else. But he basically, I think, taught Nick Fortes how to control a running game and then was DFA'd. It was like, okay, thanks for transferring that knowledge. We're now going to move on. But for me, Fortes, I feel is a touch undervalued by the fan base. That's just the sense I get. It's like I look at Fortes and think he's just a dependable young dude that, is super solid behind the dish. And there's value there with Fortes. I think it's just the problem is, like, I think everyone we're just haunted by the ghost of JT Realmuto and the fact that he's been a stud since he moved on. And obviously Sixto Sanchez didn't, transpire. Just on Sixto, because I haven't spoke about him in a few weeks. Is he done with the Marlins, do you think? And baseball, maybe?
I almost forget sometimes that he's still around. He spent so much time on injured lists and away from the team. It's crazy to think through. He and Trevor Rogers both a few years ago, it seemed like they were the superstars that were going to carry the team into the next season of dominance. Sixto getting Pedro Martinez comparisons from national media and things like that. And it's been really unfortunate to watch that dissipate so quickly due to injuries. But I don't know what the role is looking into next season. It seems like if the Marlins are loaded at anything, it's going to be arms coming back this next year with Sandy getting healthy and Yuri coming back through as well. And so other than a high leverage bullpen rule or something like that, if he can get together, I really don't know what the future looks like for him in Miami.
No, I don't think there is one. To be honest, I think he might be cooked. I think he might be done. And I mean, they've left him on the IL this year, and I don't know why. And maybe out of courtesy, I don't know. But nevertheless, I think this offseason at some point he'll be released or whatever it might be, and the Marlins will move on from that one. I've got one final one to ask you right at the end, but I wanted to just get your sense on center field. We just mentioned Jazz. Obviously, the Marlins moved Jazz. And having transitioned out of center field to solve a problem for the Marlins, and he did that well. He's now solving a problem at third base for the Yankees. Team guy. But nevertheless, when I look at the options for center field, what do you see the future looking like here at center field as well? Again, there's some question marks at short. There's some question marks because of just the sheer number of second basemen. Center field, again, feels like we're back around to we've got a few question marks. So where's your head at with this position?
Hopefully not for the long term. Christian Pache, as much as I've enjoyed watching his highlights defensively, I doubt he'll be a long-term fit with the team. I have wondered just in my own mind if there is a possibility with his speed, especially if someone like Xavier Edwards could make a Jazz Chisholm. O'Neal Cruz, we've seen, made a similar switch from infield to outfield. It seems like he has some of the tools in place to do something like that well. I don't even know if he has any experience at any level with something like that, but the Marlins coaching staff has led a transition like that before. And so I wonder if they could get creative with some solutions like that. If not, maybe just piecing together, giving some guys some opportunities and seeing if maybe a Kyle Stowers could make a Brandon Nimmo typed addition, leap in his defensive abilities. I agree, though. It seems like shortstop, there's not really a set guy for the future at that position.
No, agreed. Good call out, by the way, on Xavier Edwards to center field. He played quite a significant amount of time in AAA last season in center field, and so he has done that and played that role. I'm not sure to what level and what the quality was, but I think it's an interesting conundrum here, and I think where Xavier Edwards ends up defensively, I think is going to be certainly one to watch for me. One final one, then we'll get out of here because we're running a touch long, which is to be expected. I've asked everyone this question, and we'll ask everyone this question that appears on the show with me in the next couple of weeks. Crystal ball. Look into the crystal ball right now. There's a lot of prospects. There's some arms that are still looking intriguing. We'll see whether they move any this offseason, which, at the moment they haven't. But look into the crystal ball. Tell me, what is the next year that the Marlins make the postseason?
Oh, that's a good question. I think we're still at least a few years out. 2027 being the very earliest, probably later into 2028. I could very much see the Marlins taking some more pieces, Jesus Luzardo and some like that, and continuing to flip and bring in some more prospects. And so it still very much feels like we're on the decline in that way. But I do optimistically have some encouragement around Peter Bendix and some of the things that he's been able to do, identifying some younger talent, some fringe talent, and bringing them in to do well. And so hopefully it won't be too long. I'm thinking 2027 at the very earliest, though, is a realistic window.
Yeah, seems fair. I'd have to say your answer, you're probably straight in the middle. There's been some that have, someone unnamed has gone 2025.
Wow.
Subject to no moves, i.e. the rotation is Sandy, Luzardo, Cabrera, Brax. Basically they don't move anyone, and everyone stays, and they have a good rotation again. 2025. Some have gone 29. Looking at you, Eli Sussman, with the pessimistic view, which I think is probably a realistic pessimistic view. And so you're straight in the middle, which I think is a fair assessment as well. We're out of time. Alan, really appreciate you for joining me on Locked On Marlins, your debut. But I hope it isn't your last appearance on Locked On Marlins. Obviously, the show will live on beyond Pete Pratt hosting it. So hopefully, whoever the new host is, hopefully you can join them as well and come and talk some Marlins baseball. But nevertheless, guys, thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. I'll be back tomorrow with another guest. We are rolling them out, big-time guests. I can't even remember who's on the schedule tomorrow, so you'll have to wait, see, tune in, and find out who it will be. And we'll look forward to seeing you then.